So for our first example, we want to graph the function y equals negative 4 cosine pi x on the region negative 2 to 2. It's kind of an interesting looking one just to see it, because it's a trig function. You'd think you want to graph it on intervals in terms of pi, but we'll see that what happened there with the period actually changes how we look at things quite a bit. So for this, we're still going to follow the same general process. We still need to figure out if there are any shifts and what happens with the period and amplitude. So for our amplitude, we're still looking at that constant multiple attached to the outside, that value a, which in this case is the absolute value of negative 4 or 4. While for the period, we are still going to be looking at things that happen with b. It's still 2 pi over b here. That's 2 pi over 2. Oh, not 2 pi over 2, excuse me. Got ahead of myself. It's actually 2 pi over pi. So the period overall is 2. And I'm not going to write this down, but there aren't any constants tacked on here, so there are no phase shifts. But because our period is now in terms of 2, when we make our quarter periods, getting into that second step, we're going to be looking at 2 over 4, or 1/2. Which tells us our starting point for our 5 key points. Well, still going to be at 1/2 because there's no shifts, but for all of our subsequent ones, we get much nicer numbers than usual. We're going to have that x2 is 1/2, 0 plus 1/2. x3 is 2/2, 1. Then x4 is 3/2, and x5 is 4/2 or 2, if you prefer. And from that set of values that we're working with, we can then make our points that we're going to be plotting. Where to get those points that we are plotting, we would have our function evaluated at 0, 1/2, 1, 3/2, and 2. So at 0, we would take negative 4 of cosine pi times 0. So that's just cosine of 0 times negative 4. 1, negative 4, so you get the point 0, negative 4 for that. For our second point at 1/2, you would be looking at negative 4 cosine of pi over 2, which would be 0. So we get 1/2, 0. For our third point, we look at negative 4 times cosine of pi times 1, which is negative 1, so you get 4. Then at 3/2, you plug that in and you get 4 cosine of 3/2 with a negative that's kind of vestigial in this case because you're multiplying by 0, you get 0. And then finally, when you plug in 2, you get cosine of 2 pi. Cosine of 2 pi is 1. Multiply that by negative 4, and you end up at the point 2, negative 4. So our points are 0, negative 4, 1/2, 0, 1, 4, 3/2, 0, and 2, negative 4. And even though I could probably graph this one, it's not quite as bad as the other ones, I'm still not going to subject you to my ability to plot these points because I want you to actually have a clear picture with nice scaling that will end up with something looking a bit like this, where based on what we've set up, we've got that one period, but we want to go from negative 2 to 2, so we actually want to get 2 periods. And as a result, we'll have a picture something like so, with our period with a nice value 2 and our amplitude of 4. And we'll then get one more example here where, to make sure we cover all of our bases, this one is going to have a vertical shift.